Hey everybody, it's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lindell. On the other end of the line is California, Chris Clem. How's it going?
It's going about as good as could possibly be expected under the circumstances, Craig. How about you?
Good, man. I saw you recently, probably like 3 weeks ago now, feels like 6 months ago in Arizona at the Innings Festival. We were so young and innocent then, Chris.
If only we knew that the apocalypse was nigh.
Although you kind of knew it. You were kind of joking about it or I'm nervously joking about it when I saw you.
Yeah, I'm not going to act like I'm some sort of doomsday prepper or somebody who was preparing because they hope society collapses and they can finally use the stash of guns that they've been collecting and eat army rations so they feel like a real tough guy. But it didn't take like detective work. I semi-follow Japanese pro wrestling, and when I saw that the entire country was shut down because of this, I was like, okay, it's coming.
It's just a matter of time.
100%. And it actually, I thought it was going to be much more serious than I think is what my nervous joking was about. Like, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, if we had one heck of a last hurrah, meeting Kenny Lofton and getting my picture taken and checking out live bands, that was a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, it was really fun. I appreciate that I did not bring anything for him to sign because my wife and I were the 6 people in line to meet him, and the first guy was a San Francisco Giants fan, and he had the scrapbook from the year they won the championship. I don't know how long ago that was, like 12 years, or they went to the World Series, whatever it was.
Sure.
And he had like 8 different things that he had Kenny sign, and this guy had to come through, and he's like, Kenny will not be signing anything else, just pictures.
God, one guy who just ruins it all. Although, you know what? Kenny was pretty nice by the time I got up there, and I had the Indians cap on, and he saw us coming. Right before we went to take our picture with him, he was taking a picture with a Yankees fan, a guy in a Yankees hat, and right before the guy was about to take the picture, he reached his hand over the back of the guy's cap and covered the Yankees logo. And so, like, we basically whooped it up right there, screamed, Kenny, yeah! It was, like, a lot of fun. And so I think he saw us coming, and he probably would have made an exception for us. But I don't really care about having somebody's signature anyway. I got the picture.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And he was super cool. I wore a Kenny Lofton shirt, and he's like, oh, man, I love your shirt. And he was great. I didn't want to make it sound like he was bad. That was the people running it because they didn't want to hold up the line for 2 hours because everybody had their little memorabilia to get signed.
Although Kenny's kind of notorious. He could be a bit of a red ass, you know.
I've heard that. I've heard he's socially awkward publicly in public situations sometimes, so I was kind of worried it might not go over well. But it was great.
I almost forgot he uttered a bad take when we were walking away because somebody was making a comment or asking him about the Astros or whatever, and he said something like, well, y'all just mad that you didn't think of it? And I'm like, no, that's just a bad take, but I let it go because he's Kenny Lofton.
My wife said, wow, he's a lot shorter than I expected. And I was like, he's a baseball player. They're not usually that tall.
She's also married to somebody who's 7'4".
I guess that's true.
Everybody looks short compared to you. Were you like, what, a foot taller than Kenny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, he actually played basketball in college with Steve Kerr. They were in Arizona's backcourt.
I remember. And he played 1 year of Rock and Jock too.
Really?
Yeah. I remember this back when I was MTV viewing age. Do you remember how old you were when you realized you were no longer MTV viewing age, or are you still MTV viewing age?
I'm weird because I've never been like in tune with what's popular. Fair. Which kind of has a timeless effect on me because I was never into like what was cool. So I was never like a big MTV viewer, but I did watch MTV2 quite a bit in high school.
See, I was really big into I'm old enough that I did watch videos on end. I remember the summer where they played November Rain a million times, and then there was the summer of Black Hole Sun. So I remember kind of those video heydays. And then but for me, I think I was somewhere maybe a junior or senior in college. So this would have been like 2000. And that was the first time where they had the Video Music Awards, and I just didn't know any of the songs. I didn't know any of the artists anymore. I'm like, huh. Who saw that coming? So you don't have a barometer for anything popular like that.
I mean, maybe when I was in middle school, I remember my friend had dial-up internet, and we would rush over to his house to vote on TRL.
Right.
That's probably as close as it came. But like in high school, I was really into like old school hip hop and stuff that was 25 years old already.
Oh, that's kind of crazy. But now you're into like all kinds of music, and you're holding on tight. You're the last diehard Kid Rock fan.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I should stop being after he refused to close his bar in Nashville. But the one thing everybody's sharing that story, not that this makes it better, is all of those bars down there are refusing to close. So in terms of public health, he's a bad person for keeping it open. But in terms of every other bar on the street is still open, it's like, that's I guess the role of the local government to be like, look, this is a danger. You all have to be closed.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I was talking to a friend who's down in Destin, Florida for some business, and it's apparently like if you ask a restaurant or bar owner, they'll be like, oh yeah, the traffic's way down. But to an Ohioan who's down there for work, it looks like spring break as usual.
Yeah.
So I don't know. How crazy is it that Ohio is kind of like leading the way in terms of smart maneuvers right now?
It's really weird. And it's funny because almost everybody I care about is in Ohio, and to see what's going on there, I'm like, all right, well, no matter how bad things get, at least like all of my family that's older at least is in a state that's actually being proactive as much as any state could be about this coronavirus.
And no doubt it sucks. Like I understand that feeling that somebody's infringing on your liberties. Like it's a purely American thing to be like, no, you don't get to tell me what to do. I get to go where I want when I want. Like so I understand the push and pull culturally. Like I just, I've filed it away for now because I also see the other side of it, but like it's not a mystery where this attitude comes from.
No. And the other thing too is that, okay, so, well, maybe we could get to this later. I think you probably have a point you're getting to, so now I feel like I'm cutting you off.
No, I really don't.
Okay, so there's definitely something about being American where you're like, you can't infringe on my freedom to do anything. And I feel like it's really weird because out here, everybody I know is roughly between 25 and 40 years old. And they all are taking it very seriously. Even people who have to work are like, everybody's worried about it and the spread. And these are the people who, statistically speaking, and obviously there's negative cases in every variable, and 40% of Americans that are adults are have what would be considered underlying conditions that would make it dangerous for them to get this disease. But they seem to be taking it super seriously. My wife still has to travel for work, and it's something that's been causing us a lot of stress. Her job just refuses to see what the problem is. But so I had to take her to the airport on Monday, and there was probably 75% less traffic on the freeway than normal. It was amazing. It was like somebody dropped a bomb on the city and cleared out everything. But the majority of the people who were on the road were much older, maybe not even elderly, but 60 plus people. And I'm like, you guys are the most at risk. Why are you still out right now?
Yeah, and it's a common refrain that I've heard from friends of mine. We all keep talking about how the attitude of our parents. Like, I don't know about your parents in Ohio, but and my parents are now like they've seen the light, but it took a while. It took a lot of cajoling for, I think, for them. And I don't know, maybe I can't understand what it means to be in my 60s. I don't know whether I feel like, well, it's been a good run. I want to go out on my terms. Is that what they're thinking, or is it really just ignorance? Like, because I don't feel like it's ignorance. I think it's like stubbornness and like I keep saying you need to be stoic but not stubborn. And I think that those two circles are crossing. You know that chart where the two circles overlap and you get the thing in the middle? Like,
yes.
I think that's like the people who are 60 to 80 right now are somewhere between stoic and stubborn. And in that circle, those are the ones who are not taking it seriously and going out.
That I would agree with that 100%. And in some cases, though, like, I guess that would be called a Venn diagram. Is that what we're talking about here?
Thank you. California Chris is smart, man.
So, my dad, I thought, was not taking it seriously. And from what I'm texting him, he is taking it seriously to the point that he's incredibly mad that he still has to go to work because he's being put in danger by guests going to work. And my mom has a small business, and this is basically going to crater it. So I can't say I don't think they're taking it seriously. I do think my mom doesn't understand how bad it is, and I'm sure if she heard this, she would disagree with me. But she was one of the people sharing the Lysol can has coronavirus on the back, so it's not that bad.
Oh, right. Yeah, it does.
Maybe should I explain that? This is a podcast, I guess. Not everybody has got Facebook parents, but
no, it's true. The Lysol wipes say that this can mitigate or clean coronavirus, but like there's a difference between the different types of viruses. This is a coronavirus. It would be like saying, well, HIV is a virus.
Yeah,
so they're all just viruses. Like, no, they're obviously very, very different. There are a lot of variables make them very different.
That's why this is a novel coronavirus, because it's new.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. And some people called it the novel. I didn't know which one it was, so I just keep calling it COVID-19.
Yeah, COVID-19. I guess it's technically SARS-CoV-2 because it's like SARS, the return of SARS.
Yeah. Oh man. So what is your perception of kind of you've only been in California, what, less than a year, like 6-8 months, something like that? Did I lose you? Are you still there?
Oh.
Hey.
Hey, can you hear me?
I got you back. I think my Wi-Fi went down, so I'm now on my cell plan, but we're good.
So we moved at the end of last summer, so it's been like probably approximately 6 months. But I was just talking to a friend of mine from Chicago, and he's like, "What's it like out there? You've been out there for like a year and a half." And I was like, "Dude, it's just been 6 months. This has just been some of the craziest 6 months in our lifetime."
Yeah. So what I was asking, I'm not sure where we cut off momentarily, but so what is your perception of California as somebody who is pretty distinctly Midwestern? You've spent time you grew up in, do you call it the Akron area?
I guess I was born in Garfield Heights. We lived around there for a little bit. Then we moved down to Stowe. Then I went to college in Akron and lived in Barberton for a minute. That's pretty much everything. I'm just like a Northeast Ohioan.
Yeah, well, and Chicago is very deeply Midwestern. Like I love that city because it feels pretty comfortable for a big city.
Yeah,
And now
definitely.
to
My
Jim,
neighborhood was like that. I could just walk everywhere. I had like all these local coffee shops I'd go to, and every afternoon I would just go for a walk. It was pretty nice.
so now in California, and it's funny. I said California. It's like the size of the entire Midwest. You kind of have to describe where you are in California, but
I'm in LA County. I guess it doesn't matter like how specific I get. I don't think anybody's going to hunt me down out here. We're in the valley. I live in Glendale. It's just north of downtown, basically.
okay. And so how much of a culture shock has it been?
Um, not as much as you would think because a lot of people that live here are transplants, but um, it's weird. It's not exactly what you would expect based on like the way movies and things have portrayed it, but it's not as bad as it, but that's also a positive in some ways.
Yeah.
Like as something as growing up in Ohio, like you don't see mountains, and every day when I wake up and go, if I go outside, I can see giant mountains on both sides. And weirdly, I can see the mountain that Kobe Bryant's helicopter crashed into, which is another bizarre thing that happened this year.
God, that you would have thought something like that wouldn't be able to slip my mind, but with all that's been going on, I haven't thought about that in probably weeks.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like that's what I mean. So many bizarre things have happened this year, and I don't mean it in like a goofy way, but
No.
like Kobe dying was a month, 2 months ago. It might as well have been 2015 because it just feels like it was a completely different time. And being out here, especially, was like that was really weird.
Yeah.
All the buses saying "Rip Kobe" and then number 8 and number 24, and everybody being sad. And it's like and this isn't to talk or go into his past or anything like that, but my perception of Kobe Bryant, just as a basketball player, was one who was super overrated and who, as time has gone on, statistics have shown to be not nearly as good as he was portrayed to be. But if I said that out here, somebody would probably stab me.
Well, it's really funny because it's like leftover from the LeBron wars. You know, if you're an NBA fan on Twitter, and obviously we went through two different phases with LeBron where we had legitimate debates or internet beef with Lakers fans because they legitimately thought Kobe was better than LeBron. And you and I both know, and Lakers fans in their souls now know that that's absolutely not true. But it just like, so to be there now and like he's been retired for a couple of years, so a lot of that stuff starts to wear off. But those battles were real, and they happened at a time where I took sports a whole lot more seriously than I do today.
Yeah. Well, I think now there was a time when social media was just getting off where I would be totally into arguing and debating about the merits of individual basketball players. But at this point in time, I kind of am like, well, if you disagree with me, that's fine. You're an idiot. And I just shut it down and move on. But that is something that people still get really personal about. And I play well, we haven't played since this thing broke out, but I play with a group of stand-up comics. We play pickup basketball at the park. And the one guy one week was like, I can't come. I'm going to Kobe's ceremony. And another buddy of mine who was also from Ohio was like, why would you even go there? He was never as good as LeBron. And this dude lost it. Like, how dare you say that now after he died? And I was like, all right, this still means a lot to some people.
Yeah, I might not have said that, but then again, if you're hanging out with a group of stand-up comics, you kind of expect things to get crazy. Like, or I mean, nothing off the table.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a roast session or anything, but it's like that's not the most wild thing anybody's going to say.
So what's the? I mean, obviously, it's suspended animation right now. But what's the comedy scene been like for you since you've been out there? What did you expect, and what has it turned out to be?
Um, I expected like I don't know what I expected. I expected there to be a lot more people. I think because there's so many like really uh, famous people, but it's just like anywhere else. If you know somebody, they can get you on a show, and it's like whatever.
What do you mean?
So like I'm sure there's people who are much more successful who probably have different experiences because they're like got everything planned out. But I thought with the amount of really famous comedians out here that like if you wanted to go to a comedy show, you could just go see like a legend because when they're not on the road and they're working on something, they're just going to be around. But there's actually a lot of smaller independent shows like you would get in Chicago or Cleveland or anywhere else. And some of them actually have people and it's weird. And just like any other community, it's like if you know somebody that can help you get some spots, that's always there's still like relationships. It's not just like a giant pool. Although one thing that is weird is you could do something, you could be on a show every single night, you could have something happening, and if it's not the right show, people just don't think you exist because there's so much stuff going on.
Yeah, one from afar because despite despite the fact that some people don't like him anymore, I'm a Joe Rogan guy, and some of the lineups that he posts that he's on, it feels like that would suck up all the attention in the entire scene.
No, that's exactly it. Like I would think if you wanted to watch comedy, you would just go to the comedy store, and why would you want to see anything else? Because you could see like drop-ins from anybody there. But that's not really how it is, which is makes some sense because of how hard it is to get around.
Yeah.
If you live in a certain area, you're not going to want to drive down to Hollywood if it's 6:30 at night.
See, I made that mistake once. I was in like San Diego for a wedding, and I had a friend who lived in LA, and I was like, "Hey, we should get together." He was like, "You have no idea what you're saying."
See, I that's true for a lot of situations. Like, basically where we live now, there was only like four different areas we were looking because I wanted to be within like a half hour's drive of my sister and brother-in-law if we needed to like meet up with them for something. So that like immediately pared down the scope of where we would live. So if I go do anything, a lot of times it's like, all right, well, I got to plan my whole day around how this is going to work out.
Yeah, and the last time I was in California, it was like a cheesy insurance trip for one of the insurance companies, but my wife's uncle lives north of LA. Like if it was Cleveland, it would be like going from Chagrin Falls to Mentor. But
Okay.
but in LA, he was like, well, if we leave at the right time, somewhere around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we could probably walk around a little bit before dinner. And I was like, oh my God, I could like drive to Erie and back compared to what they're, what's going on in Los Angeles most of the time in terms of traffic.
Some of it's really weird too because you would think traffic would be bad all the time, but when I went to see the press screening of Rise of Skywalker, the last Star Wars movie, that was at I think 12:30. So I left at like 11:30, and I got thinking it would take me 45 minutes, and it took me like 12 minutes to get there because it's only 6 miles away, but that doesn't really mean anything.
Well, yeah, and on top of that, like 6 miles, if you were walking briskly, if there was a walkable path, like
Yeah.
it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Um, so anything else deeply Californian that you were able to do before things kind of went to hell?
I honestly, this is something that's helped probably. This isn't like related to sports or comedy or anything like that, but just being able to be outside in sun during the winter has helped my like seasonal mood, depressive mood, like in January and February, even though things have been rough this month. Like I've probably never had this pleasant of a winter before, and not like, oh, we don't have snow or whatever. Like I don't hate snow or anything like that, but I never had like, it was never down like you would be normally during the winter, which is like a completely underrated experience till you've actually lived through it.
Yeah, and I think the awareness of it, part of the obviously it's been going on for 20 years, but part of the nationalization of the United States. I mean, the idea that California is way different than Chicago is way different than Cleveland, but way less different than they used to be. Like
Yeah.
we all have many of the same chain restaurants. We all have like the same TV channels. There's so much commonality in American culture now that even though that places are still massively different. So I think like the awareness that we're living under a gray sky and we don't have to live like that, I think has been lifted, and it's almost made it worse. Like I didn't grow up thinking, holy cow, this winter never ends. It's so depressing. Like I had
Yeah.
to experience life long enough to realize not everybody lives like this.
Yeah, it's weird because there's definitely pluses. Like when this coronavirus broke, I was like, oh, I wish I was in Ohio right now. It would probably be a lot easier to get through, and there wouldn't be like a precarious situation financially, and there's less people and everything like that. But overall, it's been like, not that I haven't done good on like actual auditions and stuff, but uh, there was a thing on Twitter where it was like, oh, we have an unpaid thing. We need extras for Bill and Ted. And I was like, well, maybe I can't be in Bill and Ted, but I would love to just wander around on set for a minute, even if I'm not getting paid. So it's like, you can't just do stuff like that in Ohio.
No, and all those experiences could add up to something, like maybe you learn something on the set of Bill and Ted that when an audition does go well, then you get to apply it. Like sometimes you just got to be around stuff, and you can't be around stuff in Ohio.
That's definitely true. There's somebody I know who is a terrible actor who has been cast in a lot of stuff, and they are just really good at auditioning, and nobody's caught on yet.
And then everybody gets disappointed and they're like, I wonder why that bombed.
No, it's seriously a thing. Like people, I don't want to say this person, but I'm more friends with one of their friends. Is like, I don't know why this person uh, can't get on like a full time, like as a regular on these shows, and it's because he gets cast as a guest star and has no idea what to do, and that's pretty much the end of it with that casting director.
So how much of it is like not knowing what to do, or like not being, is it, or not being willing to learn? Like that's so the willingness to adapt, I find, is more important than like raw talent all the time.
100%, I think so. I definitely have had the like a seminar with a casting person where they're like, 100%. If you're talented, it helps. But if you're easy to work with and you handle direction and what you're told to do well, that's more important.
Yeah, I think that's every walk of life. It only makes sense that that would be in Hollywood too. Just because like we've all worked, before I worked in the family business, I worked at a company, and I know for a fact in my first job I was miserable, and I didn't feel like I had any direction. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was a pain
Hmm.
in the ass to work with. I was a horrible person to work with as a result.
I bet. I mean, anybody who's difficult makes like when everybody's at work, if one person's difficult, that just makes everybody miserable.
And I was too young and dumb to realize that like I was making my problems everybody else's, and it only made things worse. And I ended up transferring out of that job and finding a better fit in a different department with a different manager, et cetera, et cetera. But it was like I was so immature and young, and I just didn't know the right way to react or get my way or play the game or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And over time, I figured it out. But I was never like the most brilliant financial mind in the finance department. Like, I was far smarter at like computer and IT stuff, and I bombed out of that job. Like, I was lucky I didn't get fired. I bombed out of that job because like I was hard to work with.
Well, I mean, that's like a learning lesson. This is like success tips from Craig, but I kind of get
I
that
miss my
completely.
calling. I need to write a book that tells you how to make your way through the world and put the word fuck in the title so it sells a lot.
um, I mean, that's what works.
Well, I mean, have you seen all those books like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck? And then,
There, I mean, that's the person who's going to read those things is like the person who's like, today's the day when I'm going to stand up for myself. It's not like the person who is usually the difficult one to deal with. It's usually the one bearing the brunt from the difficult person,
yeah,
and they're
you're,
just trying to find a way to sublim, blah, 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 bury it deep inside them. I can't speak today for some reason.
no, it's really funny because I love a couple of those kind of self-helpy type books a year. And I listened to
Mhm.
the audiobook of that one, but I never would have listened to them when I needed them. Like, I'd already kind of turned the corner, and now I find them interesting. After I turned the corner kind of on my own, I figured some things out on my own.
I can totally relate to that. I had a job right out of college that I got laid off from, and I was definitely much more capable and competent than the people I worked with in my department. But I hated the job and I had no respect for anybody. And we would have these seminars, and the guy was talking, and he thought I was sleeping, which I guess would be bad enough, but it actually was worse. I was trying to make my friends laugh by pretending I was sleeping and also like banging my head on the table because I was like, this is the most boring thing I've seen in my life, which is way more disrespectful than falling asleep at 8 in the morning. Like, I was willfully being an asshole. So when I got laid off and they said, I found that out later on, I was mad because I was like, I wasn't asleep. But it wasn't until like 6 years later I was like, oh, what I did was worse than being asleep. So I guess it's fine.
What industry was that? Like, what kind of seminars are we talking about?
It's a company.
You
How
don't
can
have
I
to name
describe this?
names, but
Yeah, well, they're going under soon probably, but my mother-in-law still works there. It was a company that like worked to market products
oh,
like
okay.
in store. They'd like set up end caps, and basically in the main office there would be all these departments running, and I worked in the department that would like publish the reports. So we'd just make like a giant Excel spreadsheet that basically, program in the formulas and then make a table. So it's like all the stores in this region had 87% of them were done correctly or whatever. I would just, there was not really podcasts then because this was 2009. So I would just put on like a YouTube video on the computer or music and just pound them out. And it was super easy, which is weird because I don't remember anything about Microsoft Excel at this point. But like, you don't need that skill really, except for to use Microsoft Excel.
Oh, that's
And
funny.
so on the seminar, this was actually kind of nice. Now looking back at it, I really feel like a dick because like once a month we'd have these big meetings and they would give us free breakfast and stuff like that. But we'd have to go into work an hour earlier. So that's why I was so mad about it because then that meant I had to wake up at 7 instead of 8. So, I'm 21 and I'm like, this is bullshit. 22, whatever old I was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they would just be talking about like, oh, the company did this month. We got a client with Microsoft. Microsoft's our client now. We're going to do this. So it's just boring corporate talk. But
So, and
yeah,
that leads me to another thing that I had no idea we were going to talk about, but that comes to mind. Like this whole idea that there's something unique or uniquely bad about millennials. Like, I was talking to my dad about this the other day. I was like, come on, you went to high school at, in East Cleveland, you went to Case Western, you went to Rutgers for a little while. Like, you there are a lot of turds you went to high school with too. Like this idea that
Yeah.
there's something uniquely millennial about bad employees. Like it's the same percentage of bad employees that happened in the greatest generation and that happened in the boomer generation, like, and Generation X. They're losers. And the percentage, the variability on the percentage, it can't vary more than 1%.
It's the exact same. What are they? What's somebody said this in like the 50s? Like every generation grows up to hate the previous one or whatever, or
Yeah.
every generation grows up to hate the next one. It's true. It's
And
like,
this is Generation
oh,
X's time to shine, as we talked about, in terms of like taking this seriously and being the adults in the room.
you know, that's just what happens. You grow up and you're like, kids are stupid. Everybody gets to that
And
point. Like,
and old people are old.
exactly. And it's funny because when I was 6, I thought 30s was ancient. Now I'm in my 30s. I'm like, it's not that old. 60 is old. And I know when I'm 60, I'll be like, I'm doing all right. I'm going to be like those people who are like, this coronavirus isn't going to get me. Although at that point, it's going to be some prehistoric bacteria that got defrosted in Antarctica. It's like, that's not going to get me. I
Global
lived through the
warming is a
coronavirus.
hoax. Global warming is a hoax. What could possibly get unfrozen up there?
Yeah, oh God. There's going to be like, it's going to be like, what's that movie? The Thing.
Oh God. Oh man,
That's
this is
what's going to be
this is
unfrozen.
I feel like, and I might be making this up or I might be prisoner of the moment or something, but I kind of feel like we never got any great art out of 9/11. Like I kept thinking that strife and that whatever was going to lead to some really great art. I think we might get some great art out of COVID.
Yeah, I think that's different because that's like a singular moment and you can ruminate on it and
It had
think things
crazy
about it.
aftershocks though.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was in high school. I probably don't have a good experience. Like you were in college,
I
right?
was in college in Boston. So it
Yeah. So,
hit me pretty hard because those first couple days after, because the flights had emanated from Boston, we
mhm.
we didn't know if there was like more coming.
Yeah. That's a completely different perspective because my experience was I was trying to go, I went to the bathroom during English class and my one teacher was watching the TV in the lunchroom. And I said, what happened? He goes, some idiot blew up the World Trade Center. Or no, he said, some idiot flew into the World Trade Center. And he thought it was on accident.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought the World Trade Center got bombed before. So I went back to my English class and I was like, didn't the World Trade Center get bombed in the 90s? And he's like, yeah, 1993. And I was like, oh, okay. And then just for the next hour, went about my day till everybody was like, turn on the TV. This is insane.
Yeah, man. I was getting up. Uh I had an 8 a.m. class that I was going to be going to, and after 5 minutes with the TV on, I knew that I was not going to class that day. And then I had a car in Boston at the time, and this was one of the times, because my friends were all freaked out. They were from like New York, New Jersey area, different parts up and down the East Coast, because everybody who goes to Boston University is from the East Coast, basically, except me. Um, and they're like, "Well, I don't know what to do." I was like, "Well, worst comes to worst, I'm driving to Cleveland because I know that ain't a target. Like, it's not important enough."
Yeah.
Um, but anyway,
That's
go
why I
ahead.
always felt comfortable there because I was like, I could live in the biggest building in downtown Cleveland and not be worried about a terrorist attack there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I ever thought about was the Perry nuclear power plant. But other than that, like, you know,
Oh yeah,
you want headlines. I mean, they're all up and down the east and west coast. They're not in the Midwest. People leave the Midwest alone, or they skip over the whole thing and end up in Chicago. And I'm not giving anybody any ideas, by the way. I'm just saying, like,
well, you don't have to. There was this guy who hacked Guccifer 2, and he said there was going to be a nuclear strike in Chicago in 2013. I mean, that didn't happen, obviously,
yeah,
but that's that's been conspiracy theorists thought the whole time, and we could talk about how I would know this in a second, but They they thought the whole time Obama was going to attack Chicago as a false flag because nobody would believe he'd attack the city he came from.
It's the perfect plan, the perfect crime. Um, so the question though, do you think there's some potential for great art? Not that I'm not trying to put a silver lining on this thing just yet, but like I think I need to try and put a silver lining to this thing. Otherwise I might just go insane.
I think I don't want to be too optimistic because I know this is a podcast. It's supposed to be entertaining, and I'm going to be depressing for a second.
Okay.
No matter how good the outcome we have from this, it's basically 100% guarantee that even if you're fine, somebody you care about is going to die in the next year from this, which, going to what you said, will probably help create a lot of great art. If you think back to like, are you a art history person?
No.
Did you? Okay. Well, I won't get too into it, but I had to take some art history classes in college, and a lot of the stuff, you know, after the plague and all that was the Renaissance period. Unless I'm totally getting this wrong and talking out my ass. But anyways, a lot of that suffering and pain led to people creating those things. And I know you said you thought it would happen from 9/11, but if it's like, let's say it's 12 months till people can go back about and live their lives normally and like go out to dinner and watch a basketball game, that's going to leave a lot of time where people are stuck alone with their thoughts and emotions. And let's just say like you're under quarantine and your wife gets sick and you get sick and you're fine and she dies, that's, or vice versa, or mom or family or whatever. I'm not trying to fridge somebody's spouse here. That can really create an emotional experience that you want to share. And now with the ease of digital art, editing your own videos on your phone, let alone your computer. I mean, there's a great chance to see stuff that we've never seen before that 500 years from now, people will be like, oh, that was from the year where society stopped and everybody was stuck in their house.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I never think, especially in the modern times, I never think of art in periods anymore because having kids, I've come to realize that like I wasn't a big classic rock fan. But my kids know AC/DC, and to them,
sorry.
I know I don't particularly love it, but I love that they're excited about music. So that kind of makes up for the fact that it's not my favorite music. Like it's in the genre of art that I like. So I'll take it for now. But they have no idea that that's from the 70s or 80s or whenever it's from. Like there is no time period for them as they're discovering music because all music exists on the same platform. It's not, that's old stuff because my parents had the records and I have tapes and now I have CDs. Yeah. There's no time period associated with any of it. And but I think you're right. I think you could kind of pick out someday. You could probably pick out, these 3 movies and this TV show and these 4 albums or songs really encapsulate the period and what society was going through in America in the 2020s.
And then an optimistic note, which kind of will sound like I'm going against it at first. I just recently read an article about how there wasn't a lot of art about the Spanish flu, and people don't know how bad that was because writers wouldn't write about it. People who lost family members, they just pretended it didn't happen because of how quick and catastrophic it was. If this isn't as bad, and it's looking like it won't be, then that gives people enough space to feel sadness and emotion, but you're probably much more willing to make art about something you're upset about if one person is affected or 2 people is affected. But if 3 people in your family just drop dead immediately, and with how quick that happened, you might be so depressed you wouldn't even make art about it.
Yeah, well, and I wrote songs. I played in a band. Something, if like 30% of people perish, no, I'm not going to be picking up the guitar and finding a way to write about it. Like
Yeah.
I'll probably try everything in my entire life for the rest of my life not to think about it ever again. So no, that's a really good point. It's got to be bad to affect you, but not so bad that like you can't ever talk about it.
Yes, exactly. There's got to be that middle ground.
Well, I think we've successfully talked about COVID in a way that I haven't heard anybody else talk about it yet.
Oh, that's good.
Can I bring up one final thing that you posted
Yeah.
on Facebook?
Yes, go for it.
If I make it through this, I'm starting steroids. You said that an hour ago. Are you serious?
Well, I posted something the other day about trying to keep up fitness now that I can't go to the gym. And I think people took that a little sadder than I meant it to. I wasn't like, I was like, I'm on track. I'm not going off my diet. I'm trying to work out. I'm just saying, like, I have had depression before, and I know this is like a chance. Like, I don't want to compare it to an alcoholic or a drug addict because it's not that bad for me. But it's like, you get off your routine and you can start thinking about things and you'll get into a funk. And people were like reaching out and stuff. So one of the people I talked to is a personal trainer, and his business is going really bad. And we both were talked about how when we're going to be in our mid 40s, we're going to take TRT, which is basically legal steroids if you look it up. And if you don't know what TRT is, testosterone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about it today, and he said, I should just taken steroids already if I'm going to die from this coronavirus anyways. Who cares if my heart's going to explode when I'm 55? And I was like, that's a good point. I said, fuck it. I didn't mean to swear here.
No, it's fine.
I said, F it. If I make it through this, I'm going to get on steroids. And he's like, you should post that. So I did.
Well, I am 41 years old. I am not on testosterone replacement therapy. I'm not on HGH. I'm not on any of those things, but I did go to one of those places to get the blood test because I wanted to see what the process was like. Ultimately, I couldn't. The way it works is you get diagnosed, wink, wink, diagnosed, and then they prescribe you for a monthly fee. Usually they want you to pay 5 or 6 months up front, and then they ship it to your house and you have to inject yourself at home. For me, that was a bridge too far, or it was. We'll see after COVID. I might be in.
Literally, it's just a loophole to take steroids. Legally, I should say, not literally.
Yeah. Yep.
The doctor says it's okay.
Well, and honestly, the testosterone replacement therapy, I mean, once you get to be in your 40s, the testosterone levels do drop. So like you want to feel like you're still in your 20s, there's only one way to do it.
That's something to look forward to, I guess.
Yeah.
I do know that as soon as I turned 30 and my phone realized, or like I was in my 30s, my phone realized how often I was at the gym. I started getting Instagram ads for TRT, and this was in Chicago. And there was this old guy, he was 60, and he would the whole ad was him doing 25 reps of 225 pounds on the bench. And it said that would have broken the record for any Chicago Bears player. And he's 60 years old. And it was like a link to his clinic. And I was like, all right, that's a good ad.
Yeah, because at a certain point, it's like you look at a guy like Geraldo, he's 76. Like, how bad could it be? I'm speculating. I'm just speculating.
Stallone and Schwarzenegger. It rocked my world to see Schwarzenegger say, thanks to the governor's order, he's not allowed to leave his house because he's over 65. And I'm like, oh man, Arnold's 72. What is this world coming to?
Oh, he is 72. That's by the way, like if we didn't talk about it, but if you really want to spend valuable time distracting yourself, streaming things at home, you got to find I don't know if it's on Prime. I don't know Netflix. I don't know if you have to buy it, but Cliffhanger. I'm putting Cliffhanger on the list. I'm watching that awful movie at some point because I love it.
I own Cliffhanger, Craig, so I don't have to look it up. I know you're talking to the listeners, but Another one I would
Isn't it
recommend.
amazing?
It is. It's the early '90s. Stallone is considered, like, if you look back, they're not great movies, but that movie and Demolition Man, I think they both came out in back-to-back summers, are a great 1-2 combination. I just watched Demolition Man, and it does not hold up in terms of being a good movie, but it's very entertaining.
I'm nervous about the visuals in Cliffhanger because I haven't seen it in so long.
They are still good because they basically had we can't go on for another half hour, but if you look it up, there was a stuntman that got paid a huge amount because he did what was considered the most dangerous stunt of all time at that point.
Oh,
And
wow.
they didn't have insurance for the stunt. They're like, we can't get it insured. And he's like, all right, if you pay me $1 million, I'll do this stunt. And he did it without insurance and lived. But that's why the shots hold up, because it's a guy hanging from cliffs.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Now I'm going to enjoy it that much more.
Not Stallone, but
No.
the stuntman.
Yeah, no, it's so great. It's so great. That era of movies, even though that was like not critically a great era for movies, I loved those. Those were my favorite action, and all the ones that followed up were kind of like poor man's version of that era.
I would agree. The '80s action era basically ended in like '95 when Eraser came out with Schwarzenegger. That's like the last '80s style action movie. I know you're halfway through the '90s there, and then the rest, until like action movies now don't even really exist. Like superhero movies would be like the modern action movies, but they don't really fit in terms of that template. But that was pretty much from like the early '80s to mid '90s is the golden age of action movies.
Yeah, and you're right. There's always a hangover. Like the '80s style doesn't just stop because it goes from 1989 to 1990. Like like musically, Technotronic I think came out in '91.
Okay.
Even though we think about '90s, we're like, oh, grunge. No.
Yeah.
No, 91, 92, 93, they were still wearing oversized pants and like really bad synthesizers.
Yeah. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because I would say like the peak of the '80s action movies was probably the late '80s. You know, you had Die Hard in '88.
And Total Recall. Total Recall came out in 1990. You're telling me that's not an '80s movie? Get out of here.
Terminator 2, it's sci-fi, but it's like '91. That's an '80s action movie.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the peak is like the late '80s, early '90s, and then they had like 3 or 4 years of diminishing returns, and then basically went into hibernation for 15 years.
Well, I think we left them with some good stuff. Take steroids. Assuming when you get out of this, watch Cliffhanger and take steroids, okay?
If you're going to die from a respiratory disease, it might as well have been from an enlarged heart.
I'm gonna title this podcast "Watch Cliffhanger and Take Steroids."
It's a lot easier if you're rich like Schwarzenegger and you could get a pig valve to replace yours, and your heart, a pig heart valve at the Cleveland Clinic, but not all of us can afford that. So
nope, not yet. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. All right,
that's
Chris,
going to lead to a next pandemic outbreak. All right,
Chris, this was fun. It was good to catch up. Thanks for jumping on the podcast. Thanks for giving people something to kind of have fun with and laugh about, and stay strong, stay healthy.
I hope, yeah, that's what I said. I hope I wasn't too negative. I hope everybody does well. We're going to make it through this.
All right, man. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.